This vintage Rat reissue is the first guitar pedal I ever owned. It's near and dear to my heart for a couple of reasons. One of them being it is the first guitar pedal I ever owned. It's the vintage reissue of the Rat. There are quite a few different models of the Rat down through the years. I've been using this almost 25 years, so as long as I've been playing electric guitar. It's also near and dear to my heart because it's one of my central pedals. I use it pretty much all the time, so it's pretty integral to my sound. It has a special place in my heart because it was a gift from my father. My parents grew up playing music as a hobby, and that definitely was an inspiration to me in terms of taking on music when I was growing up. But my father was not one for effects pedals or loud guitar, so the fact that he still went and bought me one is kind of pretty cool. He went on a business trip to New York. I was growing up in Ireland at the time. He came back home and he had talked to somebody in the guitar store and asked them for some kind of recommendation. They'd recommended this pedal. So kind of unusual thinking about my father that he would go and buy this. I've had it ever since, and it's pretty sturdy. It has a pretty heavy metal box, so it's fairly durable, although I've had to have it repaired at least once over the years. At one point it stopped working and I went to the guitar store to get it repaired, and they told me they weren't sure they could repair it because there's a special type of transistor or resistor that really is central to shaping the sound, and they weren't sure they could get these anymore. And I panicked because I thought, well, if I don't have that box and that sound, what am I going to do? So I went and bought what they said in the store was the new version, kind of reissue of it. So I bought this thinking, okay, great, if one fails I have another one. They didn't exactly have this precise model. So buying this one, plugging it in and playing it, it just didn't quite sound the same. I just thought it was a little overbearing. It sounded like some other distortion pedals and it just wasn't exactly what I was looking for. So a little disappointed. Thankfully they were able to find the part. They were able to fix this one, and I went back to playing that one. So I just tossed this aside in a box and really haven't used it, but I'm curious now to do a bit of an A/B test against them. If you look at the Rat website, you'll see all the different models they've made down through the years. They started making these in 1978. They mass-produced them from 1979. This particular one that I've been playing with most of the time is the vintage Rat reissue. This was made between 1991 and probably 1996, 1997. The reason I know that this is a reissue and not an original is because it says Proco on the label there on the box rather than Proco Sound Inc., which the originals have. So that's why I know this is a vintage reissue. This one I can tell by the fact that it has a slightly sloped enclosure box. I can tell that this dates from 2003 or later. They were actually making these Rat 2s from 1988. The reason you can tell it's a Rat 2 is because it has a little LED light that lights up red, and also the shape of the box and the fact that it has that kind of block capital letter luminous Rat, as opposed to the logo in the more stylized curlicue. This pedal is very popular. It's been played by all kinds of musicians, from Tom York to Buckethead to Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth to James Hetfield apparently. Kurt Cobain apparently had one. Jeff Beck as well. When I got this in college and started playing it in my band at the time, at first I thought, what the hell, this black box, this looks awful. This doesn't look like anything I've seen on TV. It doesn't look like anything I've seen my friends playing. But as soon as I plugged it in and started to play with it, I started to like the sound, and I also got a lot of great feedback from people saying, oh no, you've got a great one there. This is a pretty interesting pedal. I think Kurt Cobain has used one. Nirvana was always a big band that I was following at the time, so knowing they had kind of that sound was great. So I'm going to go ahead and plug both of them in side by side and just test them out, because it's been a few years since I played the new one that I got, and I want to just see, does it still give me that sense of, well, this is just not quite the same flavor, this is still a little bit overbearing. For this A/B test, I'm going to play my Stratocaster Stevie Ray Vaughan custom model, which I've been playing a very long time now. I have this about 20 years. And just to limit how much setting adjustment, I'm probably going to stick largely to the bridge pickup, which is the humbucker, the Seymour Duncan humbucker. I'll be playing this through my Vox amp, which gives a really good sound. Both of these Rats have the same sorts of controls. They have a distortion knob, which increases how much of the effect you want. They have a filter, which is sort of like a tone, and they have a volume control. And I'm going to A/B test them in largely the same settings What's handy about this reissue is it also has a battery pack which you can undo either with your hands or with an Allen key, and that simply removes, and you can replace a 9-volt battery. The reissue also has the same thing. So both of them have the 9-volt battery. They also take a 9-volt DC adapter. Now this is fine, but it's kind of annoying because your standard 9-volt adapters that you buy on a pedal board or that you buy on the daisy chain, they'll usually have this kind of a plug, which doesn't really work for the input here. So what you end up having to do is use some kind of an adapter, as I've done here. So you can use your standard off-the-shelf plug, or you actually have to get a 9-volt adapter, a 9-volt power supply that plugs directly into it. So that's just a little bit inconvenient because it just makes it just that little bit different from all the other pedals that are on your pedal board. This is my clean tone sound. I'm going to start out with the Rats at about 9 o'clock on the distortion. The filter is pointing straight up to midnight, and the volume I'm going to leave it about halfway. So first of all, that's the vintage reissue. This is the Rat 2. Already at this low level of distortion, I feel like it's a lot more overbearing and just electric and a lot more high-end, and that's great if that's the sound you're going for, but it's definitely not the same sound as the vintage reissue on the left. This is the Rat 2 on the right. And this is the vintage reissue. So already I definitely feel like there's a distinct difference. I'm going to turn the distortions up to midnight. This is the vintage on the left. Let's see what the Rat sounds like with half the distortion. And it still, for me, has that same feeling that it's a beautiful, blistering, hot sound, but it's just definitely, it's more overbearing than the vintage sound. We'll just crank it up one more notch. And we'll start with the vintage reissue. Now let's see what the Rat 2 does. Let's just go all the way with the distortion on both of these and let's just see what that sounds like. pretty meaty. I have a feeling this Rat 2 is just gonna really over crush it. It's funny because as I go to the upper end of the distortion, I don't feel like the Rat 2 is quite overcooking it as much. It seems like they start to approach each other, but there's still a difference in the sound. Still feels like it's not quite the same grunge era sound. It feels a little more towards blistering, shredding metal or crazy blues, and it feels like it's losing some of that muddy texture that maybe would go with the Nirvana sound. The other thing you can do with these pedals, I'm going to bring the distortion down a little bit to halfway to just demonstrate, is you can adjust the filter. So we're going to bring the filter all the way to the right, which should give us a bit of a muddier sound. Definitely a muddier sound. Let's try that on the reissue. It's muddier, but not quite as muddy. Let's try the filter in the other direction completely. Should just sharpen the whole sound up. Just still feels overcooked, and it kind of calls for a blistering blues solo, which is not a good thing because I'm not that great at that. But it's sort of, the sound invites me to want to just mess around in some pentatonic, and you know, that's kind of the worst thing for me. So look, if that's what you're looking to do, maybe this is the pedal for you. But I honestly feel like the vintage reissue Rat just has a more versatile sound for indie rock, for alternative rock, for folk rock, for grunge, and it's a little less on the blistering blues or shredder metal side that you get with the Rat 2. So that's the review of the pedals. I think it kind of confirms for me what I remember, which is the new Rat, it's blistering, it's kind of electric, it's red hot, it just feels a little overbearing. Now, that might be the sound you want to go for in certain moments, and that might have its usages, but really it is a different sound to the vintage reissue Rat. They do not sound exactly the same. They're close, but they're not the same. So personally, I'm going to stick to the big box that I've got rather than the new one, but it does have its uses. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. I've seen some other videos on YouTube where they review different Rat models, and I watched a few of those because I was fascinated too. So definitely interested to hear your thoughts, and as always, if you liked this or you watched it, just click the like button, and don't forget to subscribe.